All right, continuing with our big idea, understanding improper fractions, mixed numbers, ratios, and percents help us to describe and to compare quantities or amounts. Now, we've touched on this already, but today we're going to talk about relating fractions, decimals, and percents and how they're all connected. Well, we know they're definitely all connected because they're different ways to tell the same amount. But then trying to determine which one is larger and smaller and so on, especially if one is written as a fraction, one is as a decimal, and one is as a percent, can be difficult. So we're going to talk about relating them and comparing them today. Fractions, decimals, and percents are three ways to describe the part of a whole. So it's not the entire amount, it's a part of it. Here we have an example. We have 25 out of 100 shaded in. We could write it as a fraction, 25 out of 100, which then can be turned into a decimal, 25 hundredths, or can be turned into a percent, 25%. We can also write it as a decimal and then change it into a fraction or change it into a percent. We can also take a percent and write it as a fraction or write it as a decimal. So we can take one of our first ones, it could be the fraction, it could be the decimal, it could be the percent, and change it into the other two. This becomes really helpful when you're trying to compare quantities, that you can change them all into the same kind of thing. So for example, you might change them all into fractions if you're really good with fractions. You might change them all into decimals and then compare them as decimals. You might change them all into percents and compare them as percents. We'll look at some of that today. What percent of this shape is shaded? Well, 3/4 of this percent is shaded. We can write it as a fraction, 3/4. If we wanted to then change it into a percent, well, we know percent means out of 100, and we could use an equivalent fraction to figure that out, or we could even divide, right? 4 times what is 100? Well, 4 times 25 is 100. So what we do to the bottom, we do to the top. 3 times 25 is 75. And you can see that work happening here, which would make it 75%. Okay. We could also go in our calculator 3 divided by, sorry, wrong sign, 3 divided by 4, and we would also end up with this as our answer, which we then can make both of these, we can make into 75%. So we could say that 75% of that shape is shaded. 75% of the shape is shaded. So it depends. You could take your fraction, your initial fraction, make it into a fraction out of 100 using equivalent fractions, or you could divide to get your decimal. Both of those can easily be changed into a percent. So now you could say 75% of this rectangle is shaded. Let me show you one more strategy to find percent, and we call that cross multiplying. So we did equivalent fractions, we did changing it into a decimal, but you could cross multiply. What that means is you multiply across. So 9 times 100 is 900, and then you divide that answer by what you've got there. So 9 times 100 is 900. 900 divided by 20 is, and we would have to figure that out, would definitely need to use a calculator most likely for most of you. And again, if in case I haven't mentioned it, this entire unit, you are welcome to use your calculator, but remember that whenever you use your calculator, you must show the work that you typed into your calculator. Using a calculator does not mean that there does not need to be any work. It just means you don't need to do the work on paper. You do the work on the calculator, and is still written down as far as the steps, what you punched in. So go ahead and punch that into your calculator and see what you would come up with. Which equals 45, so it would be 45%. Here's another example. You can go ahead and press pause and try it on your own now, remembering you're multiplying across and dividing. So 7 times 100, that answer divided by 17. Go ahead and press pause and try that now. All right, so 7 times 100 is going to be 700. We can just annex the 0 there. 7 times 1 is 7. Add the 2 zeros. Now 700 divided by 17 is where it gets tricky. You're going to have to punch that part probably into your calculator. 700 divided by 17 equals, and we end up with 41.176, and so on. Really, we're going to now round this, is what we're going to have to do. 41, and we would look at the one right after. Sometimes we'll look at both, but the one would tell us that the other one would stay exactly the same, so it would become 41%. All right, now you're going to do some practice. Number 4, you're going to estimate the percent for each grid. Actually, go ahead and just count them and write them as a percentage. Here you're going to write each percentage as a decimal. Here you're going to take it from a fraction and make it into a percent. So go ahead and press pause and try those at this point. All right, well, let's take a look. Counting wise here, we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and then we've got a couple groups of 3 there, so 14 groups of 3. We've got 3, 6, 9, 12, so 14 plus 12 plus is 26, so it would be 26%. B, 2, 4, 6, 8, so we've got 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across, 6 along the bottom, 5 rows of 4, so 6 and 6 is 12, 8 and 12 is 20, and then we have the 5 rows across here, 5, 10, 15, 20, that's another 20, so 20 plus 20, which make it about 40, so 40%. I'm going to leave C for now. Write each percent as a decimal. Well, 84%, we know we have to make it into hundredths, so it would be 84 hundredths, 0.84, and you do have to have the 0 decimal in front. 17%, again, would be 17 hundredths, ending in the hundredths place. 25%, 25 hundredths, because we know it's out of 100. And 100%, actually becomes 1.00. That one can be a bit tricky. All right, number 4 and 5 are a little bit trickier. You need to write each as a percent, and it's not already out of 100. So go ahead and try to make this into the percent. You're going to have to take your fraction and turn it into a percent using one of the 3 strategies. You can cross multiply, you can use equivalent fractions, or you can divide. So make sure you choose whichever one you like. Perhaps try all 3. Do show your work. Remember to do this work on paper and not in your head. Go ahead and press pause and do those now. All right, let's take a look at the first one. A, we have 3 out of 4. I'm going to use equivalent fractions here. Remember, for percent, it has to be out of 100, so my bottom number has to be 100. To get from 4 to 100, I have to multiply by 25. What I do to the bottom, I also do to the top. 3 times 25 is 75, so as a percent, then it would be 75%. B, we have 1. It's completely shaded in. 1 over 1, I guess, as a fraction. Percent, that really means the whole thing. When it's the whole thing, it's always 100%. So not too bad there. C, we have another fraction. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts, of which 3 are shaded. I think I'm going to use division here. I'm going to go 3 divided by 5. I'm going to punch that into my calculator to see what kind of a decimal I end up with. 3 divided by 5 is 0.6. Now, does that mean 6%? No, because percent has to be out of hundredths, so I have to end in my hundredths place. What do I add onto the end so I can end into my hundredths place? I can add a 0. 60 then as a decimal, which would make it 60%. Oops, I can't get that 0 in there. Imagine that, or not the 0, the circle in there. Imagine that it's there for now because the edge of my pen won't work on that side of the screen. All right, so that's question 4. Now let's take a quick peek at question 5. 5 is really exactly the same. The only thing different is that you're looking at a fraction using a set of shapes instead of one full shape. So again, using equivalent fractions, cross-multiplying, or dividing, your choice. Go ahead and press pause and find the percent for each of those. Make sure again you show your work. Alrighty, let's take a look. A. We have how many pieces are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Out of 10 we have 5. 5 out of 10. We might just know this one. We might know half. Well, half of what is what? As a percent, well, half is 50%. And I could just do that. B. Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of 4. That would mean a total of 24. And we have 6 of them shaded, so 6 out of 24. Perhaps I'm going to use cross-multiplying here. I haven't used cross-multiplying yet. So I multiply across 6 times 100. Annexing 0, 6 times 1 is 6. Add the zeros, 2 zeros is 600. 600 now I have to divide by 24, which is where my calculator comes in. 600 divided by 24 gives me 25. So that would be my percent, 25%. And last we have C, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means 25 is my total, 5 times 5. And I have 3 rows, 5, 10, 15, so 15 out of 25 is my fraction. I'm going to use division. I'm going to go 15 divided by 25. And again, this is where my calculator comes in handy, which leaves me with 0.6. Again, I can't make that 6%. It has to be into the hundredths place, so it's out of 100. So I'm going to add that 0 in. Means it becomes 0.60, which makes it 60%. Alrighty, so this was relating fractions, decimals, and percent, and we already did the percent page, so we don't have to do that first portion. We only have to do the second portion, page 192 to 193. Numbers 1, 2, and 3, and we're only doing D, E, and F of each. And you do not have to color the hundredths grid for 2 and 3. And then we are also doing questions 6 and 8. Of course, as you are working, if you have any questions, please ask either one of the aides in the classroom or myself, or a class member that you feel comfortable asking. Again, for those of you that end up forgetting your textbook, here we have 5 to 10, 9 to 11, and the reflect section. And then we are at the end of our unit, so we are moving on to the show what you know. And again, for those of you that you forget your textbook, here are the textbook pages for you. 1 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 13. So once you finish the lesson, we've corrected it together, you are welcome to move on to the show what you know portion. As always, if you are stuck at any point, please ask questions.